In this video, you'll be introduced to the concept of corresponding parts of congruent triangles. The first really big idea that you need to take away from this video is that anytime you have two figures that are congruent, all of their corresponding angles and sides are congruent. I'm going to go back and revisit that sentence for just a minute. All of their corresponding angles and sides are congruent. So we have to have a little discussion about what it means for two things to be corresponding. You've seen that vocab word back in Unit 2, but now we're going to stretch it and take it a little bit further and apply it to triangles as well. The way that you're going to know whether or not two shapes are corresponding is by looking at the congruency statement. And the best example that I have of this is down here when they talk about triangle RST and triangle XYZ. Notice the congruent symbol in between those two triangles. What it means for two things to correspond is that they match up or that they pair up. So I'm going to think about vertex R in the first triangle matching or pairing up with the first vertex named in the second triangle. So in other words, R is going to match up or pair up or correspond with X. And if I think about what that looks like in the picture, here's R in the first triangle. He's going to correspond or pair up or match up with X in the second triangle. So I'm going to mark each of those with one purple arc. S is the second vertex named in the first triangle, and Y is the second vertex named in the second triangle. So S and Y are going to correspond or pair up or match up. So S, I'm going to mark with two arcs, and its corresponding angle Y, I'm also going to mark with two arcs. And then lastly, you guessed it, T is going to match up or pair up or correspond with Z, and I'm going to mark each of those therefore with three arcs. Once I match or pair up the corresponding angles, the sides are pretty easy. The first pair of corresponding sides are going to be the sides between the blue and the purple. So I'm going to mark each of those with one hash. You can really use any pair for your first pair. My next pair is going to be the pair that lives between the purple and the red. So in the left triangle RS and in the right triangle XY. And notice that I marked that second pair with two hash marks to show that they are congruent to each other, but not to the first pair. And then lastly, the third pair of sides. And now that I've got everything labeled in my picture, I'm all set to go ahead and tackle those questions. In the first one, it says angle R is congruent to. Well, angle R is going to be congruent to the angle in the second triangle it matches up with or pairs up with or corresponds to. So the purple angle, I'm going to, in this course this year, name angles with three letters, always. So I'm going to call that angle whose vertex is at X, angle YXZ. Or if I want to name it angle ZXY, that's the same angle, but notice that either way, both of those names have the vertex in the middle, and that's the important piece. Moving along, side RS is going to correspond or match up with side XY. And when I name a line segment, I can name either endpoint first. They're the same line segment. Segment YZ is going to correspond and match up with segment TS. And again, if I wanted to name that ST, that would be a different name, but the same line segment. Angle Y is going to match up and pair up with angle RST, the red one in the first triangle. Angle T is going to match up and pair up with the blue one, so angle YZX. Side RT pairs up with side XZ, or side ZX, it's the same line segment. And then when we get down here to 7 and 8, it's when we name these triangles that we really have to be super careful about matching up the corresponding parts. So S in the first triangle is my red angle. I need to make sure I pair that up or make that correspond with angle Y in the second triangle. T, the blue angle, is going to correspond or match up with Z. And the last angle named R is going to pair up or correspond with X. So when you're naming triangles, the order matters. When you're naming the line segments or the angles, the order's not so important. But again, we got to make sure we get things named in such a way that the corresponding parts pair up or match up or correspond. And then the last one, that last triangle, if they name the first one Z, Y, X, then when I go to name the second one, T matches up or pairs up with Z, S matches or pairs up or corresponds with Y, and lastly, X corresponds or matches up with R. So again, anytime you name those congruent triangles, the order matters. Make sure you get those corresponding parts matching up. Beautiful. All right, I'm going to move on to this next one, and this next one is going to be the same idea, but the picture now is going to get a little bit more complex. So the first triangle named is triangle ACD. I'm going to take my red pen and go highlight that just so that I can talk about the red triangle. And when I talk about the red triangle, you know that I'm talking about triangle ACD. The blue triangle is triangle CAB. And again, I'm going to name that the blue triangle so that when I talk about the blue triangle, you know that I'm talking about triangle CAB. And now I'm going to start matching up some pairs of corresponding parts. So A in the red triangle matches up or pairs up or corresponds with C in the blue triangle. C in the red triangle corresponds or matches up with A in the blue triangle. And then lastly, D in the red triangle is going to correspond or match up to B in the second triangle. And again, once I get the sides in, or the angles in there, it's pretty easy to get the sides in there. Side AD and side BC both live between the angle with 1 arc and the angle with 3 arcs. AB is going to match up or pair up with side CD. And then notice that side AC or segment AC is a side in both triangles. The way that I'm going to mark any segments that are sides of both triangles is with a big X in the picture. So now that I've got my diagram all outlined, it's asking me to list the pairs of corresponding parts. So when they say parts, they really refer to angles and the sides in these triangles. So now I'm going to just read what I have right out of the diagram. In the red triangle, angle DAC is congruent to, in the blue triangle, angle BCA. In the red triangle, angle DCA matches up with and is congruent to, in the blue triangle, angle BAC. And then the last pairs of angles, angle ADC in the red triangle matches up or pairs up with or is congruent to angle ABC in the blue triangle. And as far as sides are concerned, side AD matches up with and pairs up and is congruent to side BC. Side A, I'm going to save side AC till the end. Side DC in the red triangle matches up, pairs up with, and is congruent to side AB in the blue triangle. And then lastly, side AC in the red triangle matches up and pairs up with itself in the blue triangle, still side AC. And again, the one thing that I want to pay careful and close attention to right now is notice that both of those on the left side and right side are the same. And that ties back into the fact that in the diagram, we mark those sides with an X. So anytime one segment represents a side in each triangle, we're always going to mark that with an X. All right, and that brings us to the second key idea for this video, and that's up at the top of the next page. It says anytime you have all, notice the word all there, corresponding angles and all corresponding sides of two figures that are congruent, then the figures themselves are congruent. So if I notice in example 10 here, I notice that angle Y corresponds and is congruent to angle R. The purple angles are congruent. The red angles are congruent. So those triangles have not only 3 pairs of congruent sides, but they also have 3 pairs of congruent angles and also 3 pairs of congruent sides. We know then that the triangles must be congruent as well. So write the congruency statement. Well, the congruency statement is going to say this figure is congruent to that figure. So in the first triangle, triangle XYZ is congruent to, in the second triangle, and this is where I have to pair up and match up, T is going to match up with X, R is going to match up with Y, and S will match up with Z. And again, just be careful at how you pair those up and match those up. T and S were my purple fellas, Y and R were the yellows, and X and T correspond and match up. They're congruent as well. Now, if I wanted to name those triangles in a different order, I could also call the first one Y, X, Z, but if I did that, I would still have to be very careful and name the second one R, then T, then S. But again, and I feel like there's a few other ways we could possibly name that. The important thing is here, everybody still matches up. Y matches up with R, X is going to match up with T, and Z still matches up with S. So again, any order is fine as long as your appropriate corresponding parts match up. As always, thank you for the gift of your time and watching the video. Go ahead, see if you can apply what you've learned to the check your understanding questions down at the bottom of the page. And if you have questions, bring them with you when you come back to class and I'm happy to answer them.